Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the fatal accident inquiry into the Clutha helicopter tragedy hears about the last moments of the 10 people who died in the crash.
We're live in Brussels as the Prime Minister appeals to President Macron and other EU leaders for more time to sort Brexit.
A big rise in Glasgow's drug users injecting cocaine has led to the UK's biggest HIV outbreak in 30 years. A third baby has died after contracting a rare bacterial infection at a maternity hospital in Glasgow. Also coming up in the programme, more than 5 shops are closing every week on Scotland's high streets. Can the decline be reversed? Good evening. The inquiry into the Clutha helicopter crash has heard about the final moments of its victims. 10 people died when the police helicopter crashed through the roof of the bar. All 3 on board and 7 customers of the Glasgow pub. Katrina Renton reports from Hampden, where the inquiry is being heard.
At around 22 minutes past 10 on Friday the 29th of November 2013, the police helicopter crashed into the roof of the pub. The first to be found by firefighters was 48-year-old Gary Arthur, a sales advisor from Paisley, who had been in the bar enjoying the music. He was trapped under the rubble. He was pronounced dead at 10 to 11 that night. Just after 11 o'clock, 43-year-old police constable Tony Collins was found dead on board the helicopter, in the seat behind the pilot. He'd been in the force for 18 years and was working as a police air observer. Joe Cusker was 59, a retired housing manager from Cambuslang. He was found injured in the pub close to the entrance by another customer. He died 13 days later. 33-year-old Colin Gibson was an immigration officer from Ayr. He was trapped by rubble, debris and part of the helicopter. When firefighters reached him, he had no pulse. The painstaking search continued, but it wasn't until 2 days later that 61-year-old Robert Jenkins was found, a gas company service advisor from East Kilbride. He had been in the bar with his partner Mary. She survived. He was trapped by rubble and debris beneath the helicopter. 58-year-old John McGarrigle was a writer from Cumbernauld. When he was found a short distance from the door, he had a faint pulse. He died from chest injuries. 56-year-old Samuel McGee came from Glasgow. He was a maintenance man at a car wash. He had a pulse when he was found by firefighters, but could not be freed because of the mass and weight of debris. 36-year-old Kirsty Nellis was a police constable on board the helicopter. She was strapped into the front passenger seat, trapped within the wreckage. She had been in the police for 13 years. Mark O'Prey was 44, a window cleaner from East Kilbride. He was moving his head and mumbling when firefighters found him trapped in rubble from the waist down. David Trail was the 51-year-old pilot. He was found in the front right seat, compressed by wreckage and debris. He had no pulse. The inquiry then heard more evidence from Marcus Cook of the Air Accident Investigations Branch. He was asked about the first low fuel warning light to go on in the helicopter. The court has heard that pilots are advised to land within 10 minutes of such a warning, but the police helicopter was still flying and communicated with air traffic control around 13 minutes later. Asked if he could tell the loved ones of those who died why the crash happened, Mr. Cook said, unfortunately, the AAIB could not come to a positive conclusion, apart from not landing within 10 minutes. The inquiry, which is expected to last several months, continues next Wednesday. Katrina Renton, Reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
The Prime Minister is in Brussels asking EU leaders for another Brexit extension. Theresa May wants a couple of months. Some in the EU are suggesting up to a year, and the haggling is likely to go on for many hours. But the European Parliament's Vice President has told Reporting Scotland she expects there will be an extension to prevent the UK leaving without an agreement. From Brussels, here's our Chief Political Correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
Almost 2 weeks after she was supposed to lead the UK out of the EU, Theresa May is back in Brussels, appealing for more time to sort Brexit.
The UK should have left the EU by now, and I greatly regret the fact that Parliament has not been able to pass a deal that would enable us to leave in a smooth and orderly way. But I and the government continue to work to find a way forward.
Leaving the EU is supposed to be about taking back control, but tonight the future of the UK, including Scotland, lies in the hands of Mrs Merkel and the other EU leaders. Theresa May needs them to unanimously agree an extension to the Brexit process to stop the UK leaving on Friday without a deal. The EU leaders are discussing Mrs May's request for a delay until the 30th of June, with the option to leave earlier. But they're also considering EU Council President Donald Tusk's suggestion of a longer extension of up to a year. It's known as the Flextension because it would be flexible enough to be made shorter. This top Irish Euro MP expects there to be heated debate.
Not everyone agrees with a long extension or indeed a short extension, so I think there will be a lot of discussion at this dinner.
But is a delay of some sort more or less guaranteed?
Oh, I think so. I mean, otherwise we're looking at Friday, a no-deal Brexit, and waking up on Saturday morning looking at the consequences of that, and they would be serious for the United Kingdom and indeed the European Union.
If it's a long extension, this Scottish Conservative thinks we should take it.
Yes, absolutely, because it's very important that we do get a deal. I think it's in the interest of business that we have a deal and that we have an orderly Brexit rather than crashing out.
The SNP wants to stop Brexit.
Our preference would be if we can't revoke Article 50 altogether and just stop this nonsense, we can have a long extension which would facilitate a referendum on the European question, which is a way out of this as well. But we do need to take part in the European elections, so there's a lot of things in the mix at the moment.
As he arrived for tonight's talks, the French President Emmanuel Macron said any delay to Brexit must be for a clear purpose. Theresa May is making her case to him and other leaders now.
Well, before she left for Brussels, Theresa May faced opposition leaders at Prime Minister's questions. The SNP's Ian Blackford demanded she accepts a long Brexit delay. The SNP and other opposition parties say the issue should be put back to the people in a second referendum. Here's our Westminster correspondent, David Porter.
High noon for Brexit? Well, things are certainly moving to a conclusion one way or another. In abnormal times, some normality on a Wednesday in Westminster.
Order! Questions to the Prime Minister.
For once, Prime Minister's questions just the warm-up act. The real business is being conducted in Brussels.
The Prime Minister must recognise the difference between what she believes is duty, but what the rest of us see as delusion. In her final days as Prime Minister, will she accept the EU offer of a long extension, accept that she has run out of road, and accept that the only choice now is to put this back to the people?
Can I just say to the Right Honourable Gentleman that I think it is a little difficult for many of us in this House to hear him week after week stand up and say that the UK should stay within in the European Union, when Scottish independence would have meant taking Scotland out of the European Union.
For the Prime Minister's opponents, an opportunity to reset the argument.
I think we all need to get away from this place for a few days, get our heads together and then come back and get on with the business of getting this sorted. And for me and for the Liberal Democrats, that means going back to the people and saying, is this what you really want? They need the final say.
And as the talks between Labour and the government continue, a belief a lengthy delay could buy much needed time to sort Brexit out.
I think the EU are trying to be as helpful as they can under the circumstances. I think the mood music seems to suggest that they would be open to that. I think Donald Tusk's letter was couched in really, reasonable tones. So I would be encouraged to think that we would get that lengthy extension.
Brexit has very real consequences, not least for the Scottish fishing industry. For some of the Prime Minister's colleagues, certain things are non-negotiable.
Will my right honourable friend confirm again that it is still this government's firm commitment to leave the common fisheries policy and to be negotiating as an independent coastal state no later than December 2020?
The deal we've agreed with the European Union would see the UK leave the common fisheries policy, providing the UK with full control of its waters as an independent coastal state. We remain committed to coming out of the common fisheries policy.
From the Commons straight to Brussels for the Prime Minister. Now the hard work begins. By the time all this is over, it may not just be the statues that have their heads in their hands. David Porter, reporting Scotland, Westminster.
Well, let's go to Brussels now, and Glenn Campbell is there. Prime Minister still meeting the leaders. Glenn, any update at all?
Well, Theresa May is sitting round the summit table inside the European Council building, making her case to EU leaders and answering their questions. Part of her pitch, of course, will be that talks between the government and the Labour opposition will resume tomorrow. She hopes that that is now the route to achieving a majority for a deal in the House of Commons. Of course, that's a process rather than a plan with a guaranteed outcome, and it remains to be seen if it will convince EU leaders. How long will this go on for? Well, I was talking earlier with a former Prime Minister of Finland, Alex Stubb, and he reckoned it could go on into the small hours of tomorrow morning before we get a decision. Of course, EU leaders will make that without Theresa May in the room. She'll have to go and dine with her team and wait for news. Between now and then, those campaigning for another referendum here in Brussels will project their demands onto EU buildings. Others from the UK are less convinced that that will happen, that there is a chance of stopping Brexit. In fact, a few have been handing out flowers to EU nationals, asking for their hand in marriage in the hope that that may be a route for them to stay as EU citizens.
Glenn Campbell, thank you very much. A 2-year-old girl is in a critical condition after falling out of a window in a top-floor flat in Clydebank. It happened just after 2 o'clock this afternoon on Dumbarton Road. Police say the young girl's injuries are very serious. They're still trying to establish what happened. They've appealed for any witnesses to contact them and also want to hear from any motorists who might have dash cam footage of the incident. And police have confirmed that the body of a man found in Woodlands last week is that of 30-year-old Ross Taylor. He went missing from his home in Midlothian shortly after his baby son had heart surgery. Last week, his partner appealed for him to get in touch. Police say Mr. Taylor's death isn't being treated as suspicious. A significant increase in cocaine injection among Glasgow's drug users has led to the UK's worst HIV outbreak for 30 years. According to a study, homelessness was among the key factors among what's been described as a perfect storm for the steep rise in infections. Our social affairs correspondent Chris Clements has the story.
This is what's called a point-of-care test. It's
a demonstration of a mobile HIV test.
What we're trying to do is encourage people to know their status in terms of HIV.
Since February, outreach workers in Glasgow streets have been using these 15-minute kits to test for a virus that has exploded in this city's injecting drug population.
And it's just like a pregnancy test. If that goes up and there's one line, that means that there's no HIV in the blood. If there's 2 lines, there is HIV in the blood.
Since 2015, Glasgow has seen more than 140 new HIV cases among users. Today's report surveyed 4,000 people who inject drugs over 7 years.
So we're fortunate enough to be in a position to monitor how the impact of that outbreak has changed the trends in HIV amongst that population in Glasgow from less than 1% perhaps 5 years ago to well over 10% now.
The research found that a key factor in the outbreak was a steep rise in injecting cocaine.
What we discovered about 2014-2015 was that cocaine was becoming more available and more affordable to people. So we've seen that people started to inject cocaine then rather than just snorting cocaine. But it's the same group of people that we work with. It's just that they're injecting heroin and cocaine, which is obviously making the risks much worse because they're injecting more.
The Health Board here has already proposed a facility where users can inject drugs safely, but the plan was rejected by the Home Office 2 years ago.
Now, we as frontline workers can provide clients with the best harm reduction advice in the world, but at the end of the day, they're leaving our service with injecting equipment, they're going into the city centre, they're going up alleyways, exposed to the elements, often very, very poor lighting. Their injections are hurried because they're looking over their shoulder, and they're creating a lot of harm. They're also preparing, injecting their drugs with other people as well, which again is increasing the likelihood of transmission of bloodborne viruses.
Today, authorities now have a deeper understanding of an HIV outbreak that has been the UK's worst for 30 years. Even so, more than 200 people are still at risk of infection among the drug-using population here. Chris Clements, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
A pathologist has told a murder trial a man died at an Angus nature reserve after his spinal cord was cut by a weapon like an axe. 27-year-old Stephen Donaldson's body was found beside his burnt-out car. Maura Kinneborough was in court.
It was a warm summer's morning last June when police were called to Canordy Loch Reserve near Kirriemuir. The burned-out remains of a car had been found. A dead body lay on the ground beside it. 27-year-old Stephen Donaldson from Arbroath died. His ex-girlfriend and 2 men are on trial charged with his murder.
A forensic pathologist who examined his body said he died after his spinal cord was cut by repeated blows to the back of his head and neck with a weapon like an axe or machete. She said he'd suffered a series of other stabbing and slicing wounds, and there were signs he'd tried to defend himself, possibly as he sat in a car.
Dr Brownlow said she thought it highly likely he died before his car was set alight, but she could not exclude the possibility of a second attempt at igniting the body. She found no trace of drugs or alcohol in his system.
Another forensic scientist told the court she found Mr Donaldson's blood on a t-shirt and on the handlebars of a bicycle, both of which belonged to one of the accused, Callum Davidson.
She analysed trails of blood on the gravel along the entire length of the car park and on the road, and said it was possible Stephen Donaldson had run bleeding from his car to the road, where he was caught, assaulted and dragged back to his BMW, which was then set alight. Stephen Dickey, Callum Davidson and Tasman Glass deny murder, and the trial continues. Maura Kinneborough, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Now a reminder of tonight's top story. The fatal accident inquiry into the Clutha helicopter tragedy has heard about the last moments of the 10 people who died in the crash. And still to come, a Highland bakery has been fined £6,000 after the parents of a 5-year-old boy say he almost died after eating a biscuit containing eggs. A Highland bakery has been fined £6,000 after the parents of a 5-year-old boy say their son almost died after eating a biscuit containing eggs. The boy from Northern Ireland was hospitalised with anaphylactic shock. Nevis Bakery has apologised for the mistake on its labelling. Dean Stanton reports.
A very happy 5-year-old at home with his proud parents. But just a year ago, Joshua Bingham almost died after going into an anaphylactic shock after eating a biscuit containing eggs, which he is allergic to.
When we found out and started to see the reactions that we know to look for, we were so angry because we are very conscientious parents. We're very thorough in our checking, and we double checked, we read the packet and we asked for the allergy book. So we couldn't have done anything differently, and that's when we realised it was a fault with the packaging.
The product was an Empire biscuit similar to this one, made by the Nevis Bakery, whose factory is close to Scotland's highest mountain. Joshua's parents carefully bought the biscuit at a Belfast cafe because the label said no eggs.
What we've been through has really undermined the labelling process, and I'd like to say that the companies out there, large, medium and small, that the legislation's been there for many years, and they really need to take note of what it says, because it could have been absolutely catastrophic.
The bakery, which has been fined £6,000, has issued a full apology to the Bingham family for the distress caused. It also said, "We take full responsibility and accountability for this unfortunate incident. It arose as a result of a small change in recipe that was not immediately updated on packaging." In 2016, the failure to mention an ingredient on the packaging by a pret-a-manger contributed to the death of a 15-year-old girl. Natasha Ednan Laperouse suffered a cardiac arrest after eating a sandwich with sesame seeds at Heathrow Airport. The prosecution against Nevis Bakery was brought on behalf of the Bingham family by Belfast City Council. Nevis Bakery says it now has all the ingredients clearly listed on its packaging. Dan Stanton, reporting Scotland at Hollywood in County Down.
A third baby has died at a maternity hospital in Glasgow after contracting a rare bacterial infection. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde say the baby was extremely premature and poorly, but that the infection was a contributing factor to the baby's death. Our health correspondent Lisa Summers is at the Princess Royal Maternity Hospital. Lisa.
It is desperately sad to learn that a third baby has died after contracting an infection linked to this hospital. But it is all part of one infection outbreak that we learned about in January. You may recall that the board said that it was investigating after it found Staphylococcus aureus in the intensive care neonatal unit here at the hospital. At that point, we learned that 2 babies had died after contracting the infection. We know that in all 3 cases, the infection was one of a number of factors that contributed to their death. We're told that this was a particularly rare strain of Staphylococcus aureus. Not only was it highly resistant to the antibiotics that would be used to treat it, but also to the cleansing agents that would be used to try to kill the bacteria in the wider environment. But I asked the board's chief of medicine earlier today if he could absolutely guarantee that patients were safe.
There was a cluster of deaths of babies that were very premature. And that's the key element of this, that they then were found to have a particularly unusual, new to the United Kingdom strain of Staphylococcus aureus. Sadly, we've 3 very premature babies have died as a result of the prematurity, but were also infected by this organism.
Staphylococcus aureus is quite a common bacteria. It's found on the skin, but it can be particularly dangerous if it gets into the blood supply. But staff here are quite used to dealing with this type of infection because, particularly in premature babies, their immune systems are underdeveloped and they are particularly vulnerable. The board say, though, that when they identified the strain, it's the first time they've detected it here in the UK. They've put in additional control measures and that they haven't identified any new cases since early March.
Lisa, thank you. Thank you for that update. Lisa Summers there. More than 5 shops are closing on Scotland's High Street every week. Problems in retail are nothing new. You recall Debenhams being the most recent high-profile casualty. Well, both Edinburgh and Glasgow ended the year with 32 fewer shops. In Dundee, the figure was 22, and in Perth, it was 7. Louise Cowie reports.
Thanks very much. We love our banties here.
Business is brisk at Little Lies in Dundee. The shop opened last year after successfully trading online since 2015.
You can buy anything online now, but to come in and feel the clothes and see what it's like and get more of an idea for it. And I think in a boutique store, having someone say, oh, well, this could look nice together, or, you know, if you thought of that, it's a completely different experience. Brings it to life a lot more, I think.
But does new life need to be breathed into Scotland's high streets? A new reports found the number of store closures in the country's main shopping centres has fallen to its lowest level in the last 6 years. However, they're still shutting at a rate of more than 5 a week.
The data clearly supports what I think the general sentiment out in the public is. The fact is there are more stores closing than there are opening, and we've seen a net decrease of 119 over the past year.
Edinburgh and Glasgow were hardest hit, with 32 fewer retailers. In Aberdeen, it was 27.
I think the internet is a big problem. Not only here, but all across.
Yeah, if you can buy it £10 cheaper, you might as well buy it online. And you don't have to carry it back to the car.
I think it's terrible, but I think it's the councils that are causing it with their rates.
The older generation will still come out shopping, but us young folk won't do that anymore. We just go online and do it all.
But according to the report, the high street still has a vital role to play. Shoppers said, for example, that half their Christmas spend was done in physical stores. So when it comes to saving our retail centres, the expression use it or lose it springs to mind. Louise Cowie, reporting Scotland, Dundee.
Well, now it's over to Rebecca Curran to find out what's happening on BBC Scotland at 9 o'clock.
Thanks, Jackie. Tonight, we'll bring you the latest from that Brussels summit as Theresa May tries to get a Brexit extension. We go behind the scenes with the climate change protest group who stripped nearly naked last week at Westminster, and we'll be trying to shed light on black holes as the first ever image of one is released. Join Martin Geisler, who's in Brussels, and me in just over 2 hours on the new BBC Scotland channel. Here's where you'll find us, and of course we're live on BBC iPlayer.
Well, let's get the weather now from Corso.
Thank you, Jackie. Good evening. Well, what a beautiful day across most of the country. Bright blue skies, plenty of sunshine, and this was a scene sent in from one of our weather watchers at Fort William in Highland. And we'll continue to see good spells of sunshine as we head into the first part of the evening. This was the recent satellite image. You can just see that cloud across the far north and northeast where it will tend to linger. But high pressure is still in charge of our weather. It firmly establishes itself across the country, keeping these weather systems at bay. And the winds are light too, so in the sunshine it did feel quite pleasant. Now, during this evening then, there will be some clearer skies, but we'll see that cloud across the north and the northeast, spreading along the east coast a bit, and it will be thick enough to produce a few spits and spots of light rain and drizzle. But for most of us, a dry night, another chilly night, as temperatures dip close to freezing or below, a touch of frost around. Not as cold as last night, though. We reached -6.8 in Braemar, but for the rest of us, 4 or 5 degrees where we have that cloud. For tomorrow then, chilly start, some good spells of sunshine first thing, but we still see that cloud across the north and northeast, still producing 1 or 2 showers. So if you're heading out around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there'll be some cloud perhaps lingering around the Solway, the west coast as well at times, but inland some good spells of sunshine, and with those light winds again it will feel quite pleasant at 12 or 13 Celsius. Still that cloud around parts of the northeast, however, still 1 or 2 showers, and for the Northern Isles it does remain quite cloudy, but temperatures could reach up to 7 or 8 degrees. During the evening too, those showers will continue in the north-east, but elsewhere largely dry with clearer skies. And it's a similar story on Friday. Some good spells of sunshine to start the day, but we could see a bit more in the way of cloud developing by the afternoon. And temperatures will be similar too. Across the east coast, 8 or 9 degrees. Further towards the west, a few degrees higher. And looking into the weekend, well, high pressure will slowly start to slip further southeastwards. And it means there's a better chance of these weather fronts arriving in. But it does look as if it will be mostly dry for all of us, but windier. And that's your forecast.
Thank you very much, Corso. And now a reminder of the main news. EU leaders are meeting at an emergency summit in Brussels to consider a request from Theresa May for a second delay to Brexit. The Prime Minister hopes to secure another short postponement until the end of June. Speaking as she arrived, she insisted it was still possible for the UK to withdraw from the EU by the 22nd of May. That's Reporting Scotland. We'll have an update at 10:25 from all of us. Goodbye.